الأكابر مجرميها ليمكروا فيها وما يمكرون إلا بأنفسهم وما يشعرون وإذا جاءتهم آية قالوا لن نؤمن حتى نؤتى مثل ما أوتي رسول الله والله أعلم حيث يجعل رسالته سيصيب الذين أجرموا صغار عند الله وعذاب شديد بما كانوا يمكرون فمن يرد الله يهديه يشرح صدره للإسلام ومن يرد أن يضله يجعل صدره ضيقا حرجا كأنما يصعد في السماء كذلك يجعل الله الرجس على الذين لا يؤمنون وهذا صراط ربك مستقيما قد فصلنا الآيات لقوم يذكرون لهم دار السلام عند ربهم وهم وليهم ما كانوا يعملون صدق الله
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Please recite one more song on Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, tonight just one quick announcement before we start with the program. Tomorrow night there will be a youth Q&A. It will be happening in this same hall after the English program. Again, it's the priority is youth, but I know some of you brothers might still want to attend, which is fine. There's no hard cutout, but again, the focus is more towards the youth. Again, it will be here in this hall. It is open for both brothers and sisters as well. Inshallah, tonight is the second of the lecture series titled Key Factors to the Success of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, by our beloved visiting scholar, Seyyid Abbas Razavian. Again, no need to introduce him that much. I think the community all knows him and loves him. But again, just a quick reminder, he's from the LA community. He serves over there and he's joining us. So please invite him up with one love. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ومولانا أبو القاسم المصطفى محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد
وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين ونعمة الله على أعدائهم إلى يوم الدين. Condolences for the wafat and the shahadat of the Prophet Imam Hussain and Imam Rida alayhi salam. The end of Safar is the time that it is known to be the martyrdom of these three individuals. And I thank all of you for attending tonight's majlis, and tonight will be talking about Imam Hussain alayhi salam. We're going to be trying to take life lessons from Imam Hussain and to be able to make it tangible and workable in our own lives. Many times we learn about the Imams, but sometimes people will say, well, they were infallible, Allah blessed them with their mother, Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, and their father, Imam Ali. They're very good individuals, I respect them, but I can't necessarily make them my role model because they're not living my life, they're not living in the time that I'm living. But we have to understand that Imams alayhi salam are a role model for us in all circumstances. And tonight I'm going to be trying to be able to understand the life of one of our very madloom and oppressed Imams. That is, you see, for example, all those zawar that visit Abi Abdullah alayhi salam, Imam Hussain. And even though in the month of Safar is when Imam Hassan alayhi salam was shaheed, how many visitors, for example, tonight does Imam Hassan have? How many are coming to visit him the 28th of Safar or the 7th of Safar? Even though he was a very great individual, and the narrations say those eyes that cry for Imam Hassan alayhi salam, they will not cry in the day of judgment or be happy, delighted. So when we look at a person that is complete, someone like an Imam, we have to analyze them by three ways, three categories that we analyze a complete individual. One is, which is the most important, how is that individual's relationship with God? Two, how is this individual's relationship with the people? And three, how is a person's relationship with their enemies? When you look at many people, and Shaykh Mutahari, a great scholar, said this example. He said, if you look at ourselves and you were to draw ourselves, many of us would look like a cartoon, for example. Why? Because in certain Islamic aspects we worked on, and we perfected, for example, or we got better at it. In other aspects, we're incomplete still, or we're at zero still. And therefore, if we were to draw us, like a person would have, say, a big nose, big ears, they would not be, in symmetry. They would not be beautiful in this way where everything matches and is complete. But for the infallible Imams, they are the individuals, only individuals, that they excelled in all aspects of life. Therefore, whenever you ask them, and you look at these three aspects, what were they? Our relationship with the relationship with God. Two, the relationship with the people, and the relationship with the enemy. All of these, Imam Hassan alayhi salam is perfect. We have to analyze. Again, Shaykh Mutahari then starts with another concept, and he says this is that why do we give so much value, say, to Imam Ali alayhi salam? Why do we value the infallible so much? He says it is this one characteristic that sets apart Imam Ali alayhi salam and makes us love him so much. That is his connection to God. That the more that Imam Ali alayhi salam, and we understand this, that he is connected to God, the more complete he is. The more he is a magnet and is able to attract us in. Why? Because of that connection to God. So therefore, this first aspect, which is a person's religion, a person's connection to God, builds the other two in the Imams, and how it should be like in Islam. Sometimes people ask me, for example, and I'm not saying that I'm a very, patient human being, for example. All of us have faults, but they ask, how can I be very patient? When I'm angry, what can I do, for example? And I always tell them that this second part, how you treat people, goes back to the first. If you're sincere in your connection to God, if you're thinking of Allah, it's very hard for you to mistreat people. Because if you're God-fearing, if you realize that everything you do, He is watching you. If everything you're doing, you will be asked about, for example, He will judge you. It's very difficult for such a person who believes, for example, if I put a camera on you right now, instead of having a camera on me, I put it on you. Got revenge, for example. And you were watching yourselves, right, the whole day. You would be, for example, self-conscious and be thinking that, well, what if I do something wrong? People will watch. But if you really believe that you're being watched, and you're being, observed, and you're being cared for and taken into, God's mercy, then how would you mistreat people? So therefore, these other two steps All of it goes back to our relationship with God. When you look at some of the statistics in America, as you know, in Europe, for example, things are much different. Religion in Europe has gone very downhill. And still in America, there is some hope. There is, if you look at some statistics, maybe in the 1970s, you see that, for example, Gallup survey was saying that around 70% of Americans will take their religion as something important in their lives. 70%. What is the figure today? This survey is saying, of course, the surveys are never 100% accurate, but it's saying around 40% now say that religion is important in my life. People, it's still much better than Europe, but you're seeing the trend from the 1970s to now, and I think that you agree with this. So what can I do as a Muslim youth or as a young person being grown and raised, for example, in the West, or one who is a little bit older? What can I do in order to take God as the center of my life and strengthen this relationship? Well, we have to examine the Imams and look at their worship and look at how they connected to God in order to encourage ourselves that, look, this worship that you do, you might pray, yes, it's good. But how is your prayer compared to the ultimate prayer, the proper prayer? One of the scholars, he just said something very interesting. It was the Knights of Qadr, Knights of Destiny. He said, all of you are coming tonight to ask for forgiveness for your sins. I am coming here tonight to ask for forgiveness for my worship. What does that mean? It means my salat, for example, is nothing. My fasting is nothing. These things that I'm doing, there's such a reality out there, something that is proper out there, that my salat compared to, for example, the salat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, is nothing. So therefore, it's very important for us to read these stories and go after and ask yourself, how did Imam Hussain alayhi salam worship God, who was my Imam, and how do I worship God, who I am his follower? Just compare. True, you're not infallible, but still infallibility is not forced. It is, a malaka that Allah gives, but there's still free will. So therefore, how can I benefit my connection to God? Let's look a little bit and examine this first type of relationship that Imam Hussain alayhi salam had with God. When you see his worship, for example, you see that Imam Hussain alayhi salam, when it comes to just getting wudu, this is amazing. Like anyone here, just think about yourself, when you got wudu, or how many times did you really shake or think about God before even entering in prayer? A lot of us, we say, how can I focus on prayer? How can I do a good salah? The Imams, even when they approach salat and they perform wudu, the tradition has an Hasan ibn Ali alayhi salam, kana idha tawadda'a irtada'at mafasilu. His joints would shake. His joints would shake. Wasfarra lawnu, and his face would become yellow. فقيل له في ذلك فقال حق على كل من وقف بين يدي رب العرش أن يصفر لونه وترتعد مفاصله. So everyone should be like this. Whoever is going to speak with God, he should be shaking. He should be turning yellow. Why is it that I worship God, I'm saying myself, as if there's thousands of gods? There's only one Allah, one God, one reason that I'm created, to get close to Him. And why is it when I do salat, it is the lost and found for me, for example. I think, where did I put my car keys? What was my schedule today? And subhanAllah, things work very well in salat. When you think about these things, you actually do find them a lot of times. But I'm thinking about other things. When I'm not thinking about worshiping Allah, or I try, I say, Allahu Akbar, try. And by the time I say, Alhamdulillah, I think again, I'm distracted, I'm somewhere else. Right? So this relationship is one that if you want to, I'm sure all of you want to be complete. Nobody wants to be naqis, or nobody wants to be incomplete. All of us want to be that person who truly worships Allah, the salat al-khashi'in, the humble. And I'm not saying myself that I am like that, but at least we are trying together, we're trying to grow together as a community. So the first step that we see that Imam Hussain alayhi salam Before approaching Salat, he was preparing to speak to God. And this is for us, that remind yourselves that I am preparing my entire day for Salah. When I go to work, why am I going to work? To prepare for Salah. How does that work? I'm studying for Salah. Why? Because my whole life is to worship God. So if I have halal income, if I have all the other things before Salah are taken care of, if I have taqwa and I do halal and I stay away from haram, all of this means that I'm preparing myself for that good Salah. But God forbid, say, my heart is broken, for example, when it comes to connecting to God. I perform the haram, for example. My, other obligations are wrong. For example, I lie, for example. Or when it comes to business, I'm not a ethical business person. I rip people off. All of these things. Then when it comes to Salah, you can try to focus as much as you want and read all the books in the world that you want. But you will not perform a good Salah. Because prayer is about all those things before that, Allahu Akbar. But preparing your life should be already in sujood. You should be living a life as if you're already in submission of Allah. You're always asking yourself, what should I do? What is my taklif? What is my obligation? What does God want from me? Why do we run away from these obligations that God has given us? Why is it I want to do in Islam that whatever my nafs and desires want? Sometimes my obligation is family. Sometimes my obligation is friendship, brotherhood. Sometimes my obligation is work. See what the taklif is. See what your duty is and perform it. Get yourselves used to doing what the obligation is. Our problem is we raise children that they're always running away from obligation and taklif. They're always running away from what God wants from them, what I'm supposed to do now. But what if I did tarbiyat on myself? We had a teacher, for example, Sheikh Ahmad al-Mujtahidi. He always teaches us to do what is the taklif. He would say, for example, our dars, our taklif is studying. He would say, even if you go in the, for example, middle of the week, and you go and do ziyarat, which is something important, you have not done your taklif because your taklif as a Hawzawi student in the seminary is studying, for example. And there's stories about this. So therefore, he would say, when the school would shut down and be closed for example, the shahadat of Imam Hussain, or the Prophet, or Imams, he would say, dars or teaching is not cancelled. Teaching the class has been changed to another class. It is now class of azadari, class of mourning. This is another dars. You say, actually, this dars, now that school is cancelled for azadari, or for mourning for imams, we say this is worth 10 times as much. Whoever is absent has 10 absences, for example. Why? Because it's teaching us what is the obligation right now. Sometimes you should not study. For example, sometimes I get in a fight with spouse or whatever, and I don't want to talk to him, I want to sleep, but I'm studying very well, because shaitan right now wants me to study. Because shaitan doesn't want me to repair my relationship with my household, or with my children, for example. So if we understand this, what is my obligation? What is my taklif right now? Then you understand that I am trying to submit to the will of God. Sometimes that taklif can be something enjoyable. You're taking the family out. Some of the traditions say a person, I believe it's from Imam Hussain al-Abidin alayhi salam, a person purchases meat, for example, for his household on Friday, is as if, for example, the reward for freeing the slave. Or how rewarded it is to speak to the household, to the family, for example, to have a good relationship with them. Or, for example, spend time for your children. Sometimes it's enjoyable. Sometimes taklif, and Quran says, is hard. Jihad, for example, fi sabilillah, is something hard. But it is that difficult action that gives us that reward, that shows the sincere one. Afdalul a'mal ahmazuha. The most difficult of action is the one that is the most blessed of action, the best of action, is the most difficult. Don't run away from hard action. Don't run away from takalif. When you understand this is your duty, I have to pay khums right now, but it's a lot of money. It's $10,000, $100,000, or whatever. I never paid khums before. Well, it is difficult, yes, but you have to let go of that money. But how are they going to spend it, for example? I don't know. It's not your obligation. You pay your khums, yes, you can pay it to a center who has a jaz or whatever, but it's your obligation. Do perform your obligation. Sometimes something Simple as even the hamd in surah, for example. How a person is praying for 30 years, doesn't even try to pronounce some of the Arabic letters that are difficult. And for Persians, for example, we have letters that are difficult for us. Some of them changes meaning, for example. Inna anzalnahu fi laylatin qadr. If I say qadr, it means the Quran has descended in the night of, trickery, for example. In the night of, fooling someone. Qadr. In the qadr is someone who deceives. But if I say qadr with a qaf, it has a different meaning. Sometimes it's this simple that I am, for example, going to, many of you, inshallah, you go to Hajj. You want to make sure your salat behind Maqam Ibrahim is correct. So before you go to Hajj, and alhamdulillah, some countries they're doing this, they make sure that those who are going to Hajj, they perform Hamd and Surah correctly. There's this person, they say that he was coming to a Maulana and he said that I'm going to Hajj. He says, okay, so I want to come to you and present my Hamd and Surah. Says, okay, present it. He says, okay, I will see you next week. Then he asked him, how come you didn't come? I thought you were supposed to be to correct your Hamd and Surah. He says, oh, Hajj got cancelled. I'm not going to Hajj. I don't need to correct it anymore, for example. So see what's your taklif, see what your obligation is. Sometimes it's your parents, for example. Do not be afraid of this. This will cause you that first step, which is relationship with Allah. When it comes to Imam Hussain and some of the advice he gives in this manner, I'm going to read you a tradition. قال الحسن بن علي عليه السلام في قوله عز وجل بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Imam Hussain عليه السلام does a very beautiful tafsir of the very powerful line of بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. فقال الله هو الذي يتأله إليه عند الهوائج والشدائد. He says Allah is this. It defines Allah. Imagine there's so many ways you can try to understand and define, for example, or explain to people who Allah is. Imam Hussain alayhi salam chooses this. الذي يتأله, the one whom every creature turns in devotion عند الهوائج والشدائد, during times of need and hardship. That is Allah. Whenever you need Him, that is the being you turn to. And that is what As-Samad in some of the narrations and interpretations of As-Samad means. The eternal refuge, the one that whenever I'm going through difficulty in my life, I say, Ya Allah, help me. Whenever there's shada'id. Why do you think this is so? Why would Imam Hussain alayhi salam describe God as the being who you turn to when you need help? كل مخلوق عند الانقطاع الرجاء من كل من دونه, is when that being has no more hope in any creation of God except for Allah. That is Allah. وتقطع الأسباب من جميع من سوا. So تقول بسم الله أي أستعين على أموري كلها بالله. When you say Bismillah means I seek to Allah for help. I'm in need. Why do you think that this is a beautiful, tafsir of Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim? I'll explain it to you. الذي لا تحق العبادة إلا له المقيث إذا استقيث والمجيب إذا دعي. So he's the one who is the rescuer when help is sought and the responder. So Imam Hussain is defining, remember we're talking about a human being is complete with three parts of his life. One is connection to God. Imam Hussain is defining Allah as the one you turn to during need, the one who responds to you, the one who helps you. How many times have you called upon Allah and Allah has answered you? How many of these have we forgotten already? How many du'as did you have that were answered by Allah? Why do you think it is that we define Allah in this way? Why? Because the fitrah and natural nature of human beings believes in Allah. This is the fitrah of Allah. Human beings by themselves naturally are inclined. And you see this throughout history. Look throughout all continents, for example, that humans were. They all had religion in some way. They all want to worship a being, a divine being. Right? So this is fitri. It's not just in one land, it's everywhere. And throughout time, you see everyone did this. They had a religion. They want to worship God. So to have religion and worship Allah is fitri. But the problem is this, is that many times, because of our lifestyles, we start for ourselves, we produce for ourselves barriers. And we distinguish this candle that Allah has placed in us. So therefore these barriers come, and slowly materialism, greed, for example, anger, all these things come and creates a nasty human being. And this is a barrier between that natural tawheed that's inside every one of you. But when you're in need, those barriers becomes removed. Because now you call Allah sincerely, you say, I need help. And you have ya'as from all type of despair, from all types of creation. So therefore, these barriers that we have slowly covered our hearts with, it gets removed when I'm in need. So that is Allah. So therefore we say Bismillah, and this is the advice from Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. When you say it means God help me. God, I am faqir. God, I am nothing. I have nothing. You are al-Ghani. You have everything. I have nothing. And that is the essence of Tawheed. It means that I'm in need. That is why prayer is mukhul ibadah. Worship is the center, the brain of worship. Because ibadah means this, that I am nothing. I need your help. And if you look at all of creation, it's nothing but contingency. But He is nothing but needlessness. Therefore, He is the eternal refuge, meaning everything I need, I turn to Him. Some of even the greats would say, every time I inhale and exhale, I need help from Allah. Can you inhale and exhale without help from God? The problem with modern man is modern man thinks he's sufficient. Modern man thinks I produce with my own mind, with my own, for example, strength. But we realize that this is nothing. This is all in Allah's hands. If modern man, you created the strength, if you had all these ideas, then why is it when you become old you forget? How is it some get Alzheimer's and they forget everything? If you gave it to yourselves, then why don't you give it back to yourself when you become old? Oh man, when you are the strongest and you gave strength to yourself, why is it when you become old, you don't have strength anymore and you can't give strength to yourself back? So we know it is not from us. Allah has placed strength in us. Allah has placed knowledge in us. And therefore we understand from this tradition from Imam Hussain alayhi salam that in reality, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim means I am calling Allah because I am faqir, because I'm in need, because I need Allah. And the more that you say this and realize this, the better your worship will be, and the higher in maqam and position you will be. You will be the humble one, and when it comes to yourself, but Allah will exalt you. So this is the first part, very brief I mentioned, is that a human being is looked at, analyzed by his connection to God. And Imam Hussain alayhi salam, his worship was in this way, that he would shake even before the salat. The second part was what? How our relationship is with the people. What are my responsibilities towards the people? Sometimes we have communities, maybe you went to masjid, you saw individuals pray very nicely, fast very, great, stay away from all muharramat. But when it came to behavior, when it came to treating people, they mistreat people. Sometimes they're rude to someone, for example. Sometimes they harm others. When it comes to family, the families complain and say, this guy, he's in masjid, everyone likes him. But when he comes home, he abuses us, for example. So this is the other aspect of human life, is that we have to make sure that we treat people fairly, that we will be asked how we treat the people. How was Imam Hussain alayhi salam in this manner? You see, one of the nice stories is that a slave was sitting in a garden, and I think this is in the book Al-Bidayah wal-Nihaya, and he was sharing his food with a dog. A slave is sharing his food with a dog. It's not today where there's overabundance. It's back then where food was hard to come by. It's not today where we're dying from eating and overeating, and back then Costco and all these companies didn't exist. So therefore you're talking about a time where there wasn't food available. If the slave is going to give it to dog, it doesn't mean he's going to go home and eat 10 more, for example. That's all he has. So he's sharing what he has, and he's maybe getting even hungry because he's giving it to a najis dog. What is he doing, for example? Sharing it to with a najis dog. How do we treat this person and say, oh, what are you doing? It's a dog, he's najis. Eat it yourself, get energy, worship Allah, for example. Imam Hussain alayhi salam sees this person and asks him, why are you sharing this food with a dog? he would have a bite, he would give the dog some. It says, قال الغلام أني أستحي منه أن آكل ولا أطعم. I had haya, I was embarrassed, I was ashamed to eat in front of a hungry dog, for example. I was ashamed. Imam Hussain alayhi salam liked this. He treated dog nicely, generously. He liked it. So he asked them to wait there, don't leave your spot. He went and figured out who owns the slave. He went and figured out who owns this garden. He took a little bit, he came back, and he pronounced the news to him. You're free now. I purchased you, for example, you're free. And also this garden that you did this act of kindness, for example, is yours. So this is one way that Imam Hussain alayhi salam treats the people, treats them and looks at acts of kindness and, rewards these acts of kindness. A person comes from Sham. I'm sure that you know, what was the situation like in Sham or Syria? They made up many rumors. They made up so many rumors that they asked, like, did Ali ibn Abi Talib even pray, for example, in Sham? They made up a lot of hadith, and some of the muhaqqiqeen say many of the hadith that were made up were the time of Muawiyah, for example, Imam Hassan's enemy. So, person that was brainwashed in Sham, that didn't have information about the fada'il of Imam Hussain alayhi salam in Quran. Another topic, maybe for those that want to study more. Look how many verses in Quran is about Imam Hussain. From Mubahala, for example. From the verse of Mawadda, for example, about Imam Hussain. About ayah it'am, for example. So many ayat tathir, purification about him. The 4 major verses that shows Imam Hussain is purified. Imam Hussain is the best of the sons, for example. Or other verses where they give their own food, for example, to the miskeen, and the asir and others. And you see that Imam Hussain alayhi salam is, purified and infallible. So therefore, you see in this situation that Imam Hussain alayhi salam, this person comes and has information about all the virtues of Imam Hussain and comes to him and speaks to him in Imam Ali alayhi salam a very bad way. Maybe if it was us, we'd say, deal with him very sharply. He's talking about our Mawla, Imam Ali alayhi salam. But Imam Hussain alayhi salam, and the tradition he asks him, do you have a place to stay? You must not be from here. Do you have food to eat, for example? He offers these things to a person who is against Ahlul Bayt. That person becomes so saddened by his behavior. He says that at that time I thought that Hassan ibn Ali was the worst of creation. Right now I think that he is the best of creation. Imagine to somebody who is your enemy, someone who is threatening you, for example, your father, or Imam Ali alayhi salam. So therefore we see that this is the way that Imam Hussain alayhi salam treated the people multiple times, divided his wealth or gave his wealth, all of it to the poor. Walk very humbly, for example, to Hajj, many fada'il and virtues of Imam Hussain. But I have an interesting hadith that one of our ulama who passed away a few years ago, he would always say this when it came to the occasions of Imam Hussain. I want to share with you a hadith that has the name of Hassan. How many times? 1, 2, 3 times a hadith that has the word Hassan in it and is from Hassan, and the narrator before him is Hassan, and the narrator before him is Hassan too. So this is an interesting hadith. It says, narrated by Imam Hussain alayhi salam, Inna ahsan al-Hasan al-khulqul Hasan. Very easy to memorize. Inna al-ahsanul Hasan khulqul Hasan. What does it mean? Those who are good. The best, the most beautiful of beautiful things is akhlaq, that is Hasan. Very beautiful akhlaq, or perfection in akhlaq. This universe, how much beauty is there? We've been throughout, for example, California. From all these other, creations of God that you see throughout this, mountains, through the oceans and beaches, all this, these are great signs of God. But here it says, Ahsanul Hasan, the most beautiful of these things, the most great of these things is what? Khulqul Hasan, having good akhlaq. Have you ever met someone who had good akhlaq? Even in times, maybe sometimes when you're at masjid, everyone is expected, to be, but have you traveled with someone who had good akhlaq? Travel with someone who, they come to him and sometimes criticize him, want to fight with him. And for example, he just, very humbly says it's okay, for example, or, he doesn't, speak back to him, he's humble. This is one of the most beautiful things that a person can have. This is one of the most beautiful things, akhlaqul hasan. Inshallah, tonight we can learn from Imam Hussain that the way we treat people has a great effect in our relationship with God. And if we want to live life, as a proper Muslim, it is one that has to have good akhlaq. You cannot be one who fasts, but you treat people harshly, you treat people unfairly, and then you expect, Islam to grow. We have to show with our akhlaq how great this religion is. The third, because we're running out of time, is how did Imam Hussain alayhi salam deal with his enemies? He lived during the time of Muawiyah. He lived an imamat of about 10 years, for example, that he had, from the year 40 to the year 50. At that time, Imam Hussain alayhi salam has to decide what to do with Muawiyah, because the army of Imam Ali alayhi salam was becoming very weak. Imam Hussain was very brave. If you look in the Battle of Jamal, there's stories about him that Muhammad Hanafiya, for example, they say nobody was as good as Muhammad Hanafiya. And they gave him the flag. It's a difficult battle. He goes forward, is not successful. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam gives the flag to Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Imam Hussain in the Battle of the Camel is victorious. Imam Ali alayhi salam is narrated to have said that Muhammad Hanafiya is my son, but Hassan ibn Ali, or Hassan, is the son of Rasulullah. Is the son of Rasulullah. Why? From Surah Ayah Mubahila, from all the traditions we have, Rasulullah referred to him as my son, and he didn't have any sons who survived. So therefore, the true son of Rasulullah in this way is Imam Hussain, Imam Hussain alayhi salam. So you see this brave Imam Hussain, but now he also has to be tactful. He also has to be wise. When you look at Imam Ali alayhi salam and some of the aspects when it comes to after the battle of Safar or during that time, he says, Ya ashbahu rajal wala rajal. For example, you are the resemblance of men. Actually, you're not men. You're not, similar to men. Imam Ali alayhi salam is criticizing his army. Imam Hussain alayhi salam gets bay'at from many different people. Right when his father is shaheed, he gives a speech, he gives a lecture. At that time, he sends an army of 12,000 people by Ubaidullah ibn Abbas, who was his own family member, his cousin of him, in a distant cousin, or a cousin. There, Imam Hussain alayhi salam sent someone, Ubaidullah ibn Abbas, who himself had lost sons by Muawiyah. No way that, for example, a person is going to, sell Imam Hussain alayhi salam out, while himself, he's lost 2 sons. But yet they say 1 million dirhams were given to him, and with 12,000, an army of 12,000, very large, they go to the other side. So what is Imam Hussain alayhi salam going to do? Muawiyah gives more money and bribes more members of Imam Hussain's army, so much so that some say he would wear armor in front of his own people. And around 70 times they try to assassinate him. 70 times, sometimes even pulling, I apologize, say, the rug underneath when he's praying, for example, to take the sajjada underneath him, for example. Eventually he gets stabbed. He goes to Mada'in for months, he's there, recovering. Therefore, what is Imam Hussain alayhi salam going to do with his enemy, a powerful enemy at that time, the enemy of Imam Ali alayhi salam? So he decides to have this, maybe you shouldn't even say peace treaty, maybe you should just say, for example, a ceasefire. A ceasefire in this way is a peace treaty, but in this way, a ceasefire, so that attacking and killing and assassination does not happen. That's one of the things. All those great companions of Imam Ali alayhi salam are not assassinated; they're preserved. And some of the historians say during the time of the ceasefire or peace treaty, many of the greats, they were not killed during the time of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They're killed afterwards. Imam Hussain alayhi salam protected him. Imam Hussain moved to Medina after this time, and he started training and he started teaching to a very limited amount, of course, because of the pressure that was there. But he produced the likes that later on this produced the army of Imam Hussain alayhi salam that went to Karbala. Some of them, for example.
So you see that if Imam Hussain alayhi salam continued this, and maybe somebody wouldn't be that wise and say, oh, let's fight Muawiyah, he fought my father, we're going to fight him to death. Who do you think would be the first person to become shaheed? Who would be the first person? Imam Hussain alayhi salam, the true Shia, the true followers of him. All the greats, the ulama, all the greats of the Shia would be killed. Because many of his followers at that time were not even Shia. Did you know that the army of Imam Ali alayhi salam, probably majority of it or a lot of it was not even Shia, were not 12 Imamis. They were Ahlul Sunnah because they believed that Imam Ali was the fourth Khalifa. He was the most qualified for Khilafah. They didn't battle for Imam Ali as the infallible Imam. That's much different. You battle for him as an infallible Imam. Some of his army were like this, but some of them didn't understand Imamat. Also with the army of Imam Hassan, some of the Khawarij were in his army. They said, I will follow you, we'll do bay'at with you as long as you fight with Muawiyah, for example. And then when you send troops to fight Muawiyah, they did bay'at, for example. So what would happen if Imam Hassan alayhi salam continued and fought with Muawiyah? And he was seeking, he was tricking everyone during the time of Imam Ali alayhi salam. It would have been a defeat. What would have happened if they captured Hassan ibn Ali alayhi salam? What would have happened, for example? They brought him and made him, just like, for example, Rasulullah freed Abu Sufyan, for example. Then later on, for example, Muawiyah frees Imam Hassan alayhi salam. So therefore, because of the wisdom that he had and the power that Imam Hassan alayhi salam had, he took these efforts and used it in a time to spread Shiism, to spread Islam. And this is a note for us. This last thing is, how do you deal with the enemies? Is that there are certain times that we might not necessarily be in the most easiest of positions to be able to spread the truth. But we have to be tactful. You have to be smart and continue. See how Imam Hassan alayhi salam saved Shiism by, for example, having this ceasefire. In the same way, when it comes to our deen, when it comes to our tabligh, you see that through such difficulty, the Imams spread Shiism. Question is, how about us in the U.S.? How is it that, how much pressure do you yourself individually have if you say, I'm Shia, I'm Muslim, for example, or you stand up for what is right? Very limited amount if you compare to the time of Imam Hassan, time of Imam Zainul Abidin alayhi salam. So therefore we look at this aspect of Imam Hassan's life and say that we are in a time period that's very unique, and that you can connect to anyone throughout the world. You can make a little video and people can follow you and watch it. And so, for example, in South America can learn about Shiism. In Africa, for example, I remember when I was doing some recordings for the West, and I don't know what's going on in the West, they would tell me only speak for 60 seconds, for example, for this video clip. Or 10 minutes, for example, 20 minutes, not more. People won't watch, not more than that. But then they would call in from Africa, for example, Nigeria, and there would be a program for 1 hour and a half. And they say, don't stop the program, please. They keep calling, don't stop, continue. 1 hour and a half, let's watch. So therefore, you see, we're at a time period that we can spread Shiism in the truth. Many times they would kill our ulama and burn our books, burn our libraries, take the ulama with the books and burn them, or throw them from, for example, from ships. But today, I believe in you agree with me, that we're necessarily, in some way we are free to, propagate Islam and Shiism. And this is extraordinary in our history, that we have to take our efforts. And how Shaykh Murtada Ansari says, he says, people are two ways, this great faqih. There's only two paths for you. He says, either you go to the Hawza or you support the Hawza. He said, there's only two paths for you. Either you go to Hawza or support the Hawza. So which one of these do you choose? You have to support the spread of Shiism. You have to support the spread of Islam. And this is something that we learned during the time of Imam Hassan. So again, when a person is complete, and inshallah we're learning completeness from Imam Hassan. 1, his relationship with God. 2, his behavior amongst people. And 3, how does he deal with his enemies, for example. And you still see that mercy that Imams had even with their enemies. When they were deprived, they didn't deprive water, for example, from their own enemies. We ask Allah, inshallah, to allow us to connect to Hassan ibn Ali alayhi salam and allow us to become complete. If we can dim the lights, We mention some of the musibat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Say salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil fajr. يا أبا محمد يا حسن بن علي أيها المجتبى يا ابن رسول الله يا حجة الله على خلقه يا سيدنا ومولانا إنا توجهنا واستشفعنا وتوسلنا بك إلى الله وقدمناك بين يدي حاجاتنا يا وجيها عند الله اشفى لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله يا وجيها عند الله اشفع لنا عند الله. When we look at the funerals that the Prophet and his family had, nobody had a real funeral. When you look at the funeral of Rasulullah, they left him alone while they were fighting for power, where Imam Ali alayhi salam was preparing Rasulullah for his burial. When you look at Sayyidah Fatima alayhi salam, the second funeral, you see that she asked Imam Ali alayhi salam to bury me at night. وَلَا تُعْلِمْ أَحَدًا, and do not tell anyone. And you see a small handful of people came to her funeral. And Imam Ali alayhi salam buried the best lady on earth at night time, so nobody would know where she is. Then it comes to the life of Imam Ali alayhi salam when he was shaheed by Ibn Muljam. Imam Hussain alayhi salam digs different graves for Imam Ali alayhi salam so that they wouldn't come and disrespect his body, and that his body was his grave was publicly known during the time of Imam Sadiq alayhi salam. So far throughout history, we didn't have a real funeral for any of the ma'sumin and fallibles. Now we go to the life of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. And in the same way, we see madhlumiyat and oppression, that they're taking him around the grave of Rasulullah and they prohibit this. They stop it. They do not want him to be either buried there, or they do not want him to be circled around the grave of Rasulullah. They stop it. And in some of the sources it says they shoot arrows at the body of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. Arrows upon arrows were shot upon this madhlum Imam. We see the madhlumiyat of Imam Hussain alayhi salam in his marriage at the house. A house which is a place of tranquility, of calmness, as a place where you trust your secrets with your spouse. But you see that Ja'da was the one who poisoned Imam Hussain alayhi salam with what Muawiyah directed and influenced. Then you see another aspect of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, which is his madhlumiyat. And those of you who have cried for Imam Hussain alayhi salam in these last 40, 50 days, you know the maqtal, the story of the two orphans of Imam Hussain. Even the way they went to the battlefield, they were madhlum and oppressed. They smelled like Imam Hussain alayhi salam. They smelled like the madhlum Imam Hussain, oppressed Imam Hussain. You see Qasim, for example, too young to fight, but he still was so courageous and said that death to me is ahla min al-asal, is better, sweeter than honey. Then you see Abdullah ibn al-Hasan alayhi salam, that it is the day of Ashura, my dear brothers and sisters, that Imam Hussain alayhi salam is surrounded. Everyone has become shaheed. Everyone is taking turns to hit Imam Hussain, some with spears, some with swords. Imam Hussain alayhi salam falls off his horse. At this time, that is when they shoot the arrow at Imam Hussain alayhi salam. During all of this slow martyrdom of Imam Hussain, a child by the name of Abdullah, who is the youngest son of Imam Hussain alayhi salam, he rushes forward, but he doesn't have much to defend. So therefore the Maqtal says that Abdullah comes, the son of Imam Hussain, and sticks his hand, his bare hand, and to be a barrier and a protection for his uncle Imam Hussain alayhi salam. The mal'un strikes, but hits the hand of Abdullah, and the Maqtal says it is dangling by the skin. Imam Hussain alayhi salam takes the son of Imam Hassan, it's a responsibility, it's his nephew. He takes him in and he's holding him. And maybe Abdullah is saying this, at least, uncle, I know you are alive. I hear your heart. It's fine if my arm is in this situation. At least I know that you are alive. At that time, Mal'un Harmala strikes with a 3-sided arrow, strikes at the heart of Abdullah ibn al-Hasan. And these are 2 shaheeds that died on the chest of Imam Hussain alayhi salam. One was Abdullah, the other was Ali Asghar. And Abdullah, the son of Imam Hassan alayhi salam, he became shaheed, while Imam Hussain alayhi salam was holding him on his chest. Inna lillah, inna alayhi raji'un, matam al-Hussain.
Ya Hussein. Brothers, please move forward. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Brothers, move this side, please. Ya Hussein. Ya Hussein. Don't hold on to me. Zainab set me free. Don't hold on to me. Zainab set me free. Uncle has fallen on arrows, don't you see? They stand and they stare. This sight I can't bear. On this day I also want to have my share. Don't look at my age, wiser than a sage. Don't look at my age, wiser than a sage. This world without master for me is a cage. Let me fly away. My might I'll display to be like my brothers, for what I pray. Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, 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 Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, 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 Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, Hussain, Hussain. Now I cannot breathe, you are far from me. Now I cannot breathe, you are far from me. Your scent is oxygen, so please do not leave. It is for this day that we must all wait to show God how much we truly love Hussein. I'm also his son, the brothers are one. I'm Abdullah, inheritor of Hassan. I fight in his place. To heaven we race, desire to see pride fill my father's face. Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, 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 Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, 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 Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, Thar Allah Hussain, Hussain, Hussain. Although I shed tears, tears. With you death is clear, although I shed tears. With you death is dear, in your lap I can smell Fatima is near. Just like the alley, it's 1 to 40. Take my hand, oh uncle, there's no use to me. I answered your call, match me when I fall. I answered your call, catch me when I fall. My life is just for you, Hussein, and that's all. Thara Allah Hussein, Thara Allah Hussein, Thara Allah Hussein, 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 Thara Allah Hussein, Thara Allah Hussein, Thara Allah Hussein, 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 Thara Allah Hussein, Thara Allah Hussein, Thara Allah Hussein, Hussein. Take me to Karbala, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there. Take me to Karbala, leave me there, leave me there. Hussein, Rai, Hussein, Rai, Hussein, Rai, Hussein, Rai. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد.
Let's face the Qibla and do ziyarat of the Prophet and Imams, inshallah. In behalf of all of those who wish they're here but they're not here, and all of those who are departed. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alayka ya Rasulallah. Assalamu alayka ya khayra khalqallah. Assalamu alayka ya Safiyallah. Assalamu alayka ya Muhammad ibn Abdullah Khatam al-Nabiyyin. Assalamu alayka ya Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib Wasiyya Rasulillah. Assalamu alayka ya Fatima Sayyidat Nisa al-Alameen. Assalamu alaykuma ya Sibtiy al-Rahma wa Sayyiday Shabab Ahl al-Jannah. Assalamu alayka ya Ali ibn al-Hussein. Assalamu alayka ya Muhammad ibn Ali. Assalamu alayka ya Ja'far ibn Muhammad. Assalamu alayka ya Musa ibn Ja'far. Assalamu alayka Ali ibn Musa al-Ridha al-Murtada. Assalamu alayka ya Muhammad ibn Ali al-Taqi. Assalamu alayka ya Ali ibn Muhammad al-Naqi al-Nasir al-Amin. Assalamu alayka ya Hasan ibn Ali. Assalamu ala al-wasiyya min ba'dih. Allahumma salli ala nurik wa sirajik wa waliyya waliyyak wa wasiyya wasiyyak. Ya Allah, we ask you, because of your beautiful name, Allah, and all your divine attributes, expedite the return of Imam al-Zaman, insha'Allah. Inshallah, through his hands, oppression will be removed from the entire world. Ya Allah, allow us to, inshallah, all our hawa'ij and all those things that we pray for, inshallah, be granted. Allah, accept our azadari and matam for Imam Hussain alayhi salam and the Prophet and his family, inshallah. Ya Allah, remove oppression from the lands of Palestine, inshallah. Help all of those children who are starving right now and who are being oppressed. Ya Allah, remove tyranny or oppression from these lands. Ya Allah, give cure to all of those who are in need. Give mercy and shower mercy to all of the departed, and make us, inshallah, of the companions of the Imam of the age with the salawat ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
على محمد